we have, again, an amazing lineup of home-stretch speakers. And this next section is really about sort of supercharging VR, thinking about other aspects of VR, whether it's wearable biosensors, biodata, or music and acoustics, to help us really round out the therapeutic experience of using immersive technologies. So we have two speakers who will be discussing different aspects of that. Our first speaker is Josh Sackman, who, actually, you're not the CEO. What is your role? President. I was confused. President and CEO seem like the same thing to me.
Yeah.
Right, the president of Applied VR. And you've heard quite a bit about Applied VR, so I, by the way, do not have any equity in it, have nothing to do with it, other than Cedars-Sinai, I think has been mentioned. They went through our accelerator at Cedars-Sinai, so that's just a plug for our accelerator program here. If you have startup companies in the digital health space and want to apply to our accelerator every 10 months, there are roughly 10 companies that are brought through that accelerator, and that's a different team involved in that. But they went through the accelerator program, and in the process, we got to really work with them and use their technologies, and they've been great partners throughout this process to learn more about how to use these technologies, as you've just heard from our patient partners. So why don't you come up, Josh, and share with us the latest and greatest. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks. Well, first, thanks to you guys for sharing your story. It's truly moving when you could hear the impact VR has on patients during moments that are incredibly painful, scary, anxiety-provoking. This talk's a little bit different. Oftentimes, patients and doctors ask, well, what happens when the goggles come off? What's the impact VR can have when the goggles come off? Because we know VR has this unique ability to override the mind, take you somewhere else when you're in pain. But we can't live our life in goggles. And so this talk is how VR has this ability to be an engaging tool combined with other mobile technology that when the goggles come off can serve to develop coping strategies, education, developing new skills, and change people's relationship with their pain so that when the goggles come off, that patients could better manage their pain. So part of how we got here, over the last really 18 months, we've had thousands of patients in nearly 200 hospitals that have been using in everything from labor and delivery to manage the pain and scariness of being in the emergency room as a child going through procedures, and a number of other things. And we've seen VR doesn't work for everybody, and VR doesn't always make sense. But it provides a tool that wasn't otherwise available, that offers something unique and different, and fills this gap of options that patients have while they're going through these moments in healthcare. And what we found is, it isn't one size fits all. What works for me may not work for you. You really do need to develop this notion of VR pharmacy, because a hospital is probably one of the most diverse places. You could find everything from age, demographic, personality type, medical condition. You really need a wide variety of content for a wide variety of people. And then over time, it's how we get better at targeting the right experience to the right person, and using a combination of personality profiling, data from research, and a number of other tools over time, we can get smarter at prescribing the right experience to the right person. So maybe we don't choose that experience that triggers a panic attack. We can get smarter as time goes by. And the clinical research is showing that this works. In our most recent randomized controlled trial with Cedars-Sinai, we offered virtual reality to patients who were hospitalized, much like Harmon was. And by offering a choice of VR, in our first study, we saw 24% reduction of pain where we just gave a game to a patient to play. But when the patient got to choose their own content, it increased to 52%. The personalization, choosing content that felt appropriate and right for that patient, led to more than double the impact. And it's not just the novelty effect. VR has a unique ability the first time, but we left these headsets on the side of the patient's bed, and we encouraged use over the hospitalization. And as the study, which is in peer review right now, showed that there was a statistically significant reduction in pain over the entire hospitalization. Not necessarily at that 52% level, but VR over repeated exposure with the right protocols, with the right patients, could lead to better pain management. And as we've talked to patients, and they've asked how they could bring this home as they're recovering from surgery, or chronic pain patients who are hospitalized, and their pain's not ending when they leave the hospital, how can these patients use this at home on a day-to-day basis? And with chronic pain, These are complex patients with complex needs. It's not just about solving the pain. In fact, trying to mask the pain is part of why we're in the situation today. We have 100 million people in the US afflicted by chronic pain of some condition. And on top of that, we had more people die last year of opioid overdoses than the entirety of casualties in the Vietnam War. It is really atrocious, the state we're in, of how we're managing pain. And avoidance of pain isn't the goal. It's developing tools that help people develop coping strategies. Self-regulation, learn relaxation to have a better control of your body. Deal with the cognitive restructuring, the catastrophization, the fear of moving and getting out and being in pain and being in a social setting. Dealing with the mental health and the depression, the anxiety and the insomnia, and all those other things. In addition, these patients also have to deal with the acute pain flare-ups and anxiety. So VR can not only help with the pain in the moment, but also developing education, coping skills training, relaxation, through more engaging ways that patients are actually finding fun and willing to do on a day-to-day basis. So what this looks like is we're actually combining tools. With digital health, it's never really about any one thing. It's about arming a toolkit. One patient calls it his war chest of tools he can go to. So we combine VR, the virtual reality goggles, to deliver these immersive experiences to engagingly teach patients skill, but then combine it with biosensors, where we can actually optimize the VR experience for the patient in that moment using sensors that uniquely measures a patient's reaction and can change the stimuli based on what's working, what's not, and allow objective measures as a patient progresses over time to know if the patient's actually improving or not. Because we're measuring breath, heart rate variability, and over time, if we can pull it from a sensor, we can visualize it, log it, and interpret it in VR. And then we use a mobile phone, a device everyone has in their pocket, as a way to provide a custom care plan so patients know what to follow on a day-to-day basis. To collect patient-reported outcomes where they conduct surveys so we know what's working, what's not, when it's working, when it's not. And then to provide a tool that's already collecting information on the patient. Just with the health kit, we can know if a patient is doing a VR meditation in the morning, is that patient taking more steps? How's their heart rate throughout the day? As well as providing a remote control to control a device that's a little more cumbersome than it will be in the future. So we're able to provide a tool that makes it easier as we deploy these kits, not just in the hospital under the supervision of medical professionals, but in the home where there's no IT support or doctors to help. We need to make these tools robust, simple, and foolproof. And so ultimately what we're able to do is we're providing relief for the patients, we're providing training on a day-to-day basis, and we're tracking that allows us to elevate these VR experiences and using biosensors to be able to show the breath and take this abstract notion of breathing. If every patient would just do deep diaphragmatic breathing for 10 to 15 minutes every morning, it would be great. But it's challenging. There's distractions. They're in home or work where there's other things that need to be tuned out. And people don't know if they're doing it right. Just by visualizing the breath, you can show a patient if they're breathing at 6 breaths per minute. And as their body changes, as there's a physiological reaction to that breathing, we could either provide feedback that they're doing the right thing and reinforce it, or if we see they're not having that reaction or experiencing anxiety or nothing's changing, we could provide coaching and feedback in that moment. And because it's delivered on a cell phone, VR may make sense for some time, but over time it's about using different engagement touch points with mobile and video and VR and devices you have with you to provide guidance and support so you have it when you need it. Again, VR plays a real role, but we're not going to spend our life in the goggles. So it's about taking a holistic approach to digital health, where we have combined wearables, mobile, and VR to make a more comprehensive solution that supports patients at different stages of need that they have. And so this is what it looks like. See if we can get the video playing. There we go. So there's a breathing cue, and as the patient follows the pacer, they visualize their breath. And as they achieve that physiologically relaxed state, the scene changes. There's a number of different scenes and scenarios and training and simulation that make it fun and engaging for patients to come back, as they're expected to do this on a daily basis. This is a practice that they want to bring with them to teach skills. But what we found is when we just drop patients in VR, it's very overwhelming. If you haven't done biofeedback, you're not even familiar about diaphragmatic breathing, and there's different ways of breathing. and you've never done anything like this. It's a lot to take in. So we realized you need a staged approach to first get people used to VR, awareness of their body going through a body scan, used to this notion of diaphragmatic breathing and the right way to breathe, following a pacer and following the pacer at the right rate, and then eventually getting to a place where they have the competency to practice on a day-to-day basis. And we've made the mistake of putting patients in a stage that they're not ready for. And that's where, as a VR company, I cannot urge enough the importance of working with patients, doctors, and different stakeholders throughout the development process. Early, mid, late, throughout clinical testing. It's a feedback from the patients, allow you to figure out the right way to onboard your patients, provide the support and tools they need to actually be effective. And in that spirit, we spent time with Ted Jones, who spoke yesterday, who is really in the heart of the opioid epidemic in Knoxville, Tennessee. He sees 1,000 patients a month, and they're being cut off from their opioids because doctors are afraid to prescribe it, their insurance companies are no longer paying for it, and they're being left with nothing. And these are patients that are not used to mindfulness, meditation, biofeedback. In fact, one of the first times we showed Ted one of these examples of a mindful meditation, said, well, this is a little new agey, but I'll let my patients give it a try and let you know what they think. And there definitely is, a certain amount of personalization you need, not just based on the patient, but the geography and other things. But when spending time with one of our early versions of the application, nearly everybody said that they would use this on a day-to-day basis. Normally, when you ask a patient to show up for one of these sessions to give feedback, it's something like 60%. We had over 100% attendance. Patients who were in the clinic stopped by to see how they can participate and learn about this. And we include this ACT metaphor, acceptance and commitment therapy, accepting that you have this thing in your life that's disturbing you, but not getting hung up, but committing to a set of actions to live a more fulfilling life. And nearly every one of those patients could connect to that. In fact, when we talked to them, something like 75% had contemplated suicide at some point in the last 18 months. As patients are getting cut off, it's not being replaced by anything. Patients are open to these digital tools, so it's up to us to figure out the right interventions, doing things the right way, using input with patients that allows them to be able to use them on a day-to-day basis as an alternative for oftentimes nothing or going to the street to figure out ways to self-medicate. So I'm going to finish with a final story with a patient. So Bob Jester generously allowed us to capture his story. So Bob was a teacher in upstate New York and really, staple member of his community, volunteer firefighter, and did roof work in the summers. And when he was cleaning a chimney, he fell off the roof, broke 19 bones of his body, and at that time, a friend of his from the community reached out and said Bob would never ask for help for himself, but he helps everybody else. I see what you're doing. I'm not sure if this would help Bob, but I'd love to give it a chance. We sent Bob a kit. We didn't hear back for like 2 months, so we assumed he didn't use it, didn't like it. Then he surfaced and had a great story to share. And so this is Bob's story.
Hello, my name is Robert Jester. Last August, while I was working at a man's house, I fell from the chimney. I broke 19 bones. I had several rods put in my back and 16 bolts. And when I woke up, found myself with no use of my legs and no control of anything below my waist. I didn't think a human could experience that much pain. That's the only way I can describe it. One of the weapons in my arsenal is the applied VR virtual reality. If I'm having real serious pains, a lot of times I'll strap it on. I can refocus my attention to flying on the Wright's airplane, or looking at animals out on the plains, or looking at farm animals. It would take my attention away from the pain. Over the past 3 weeks, I went with no opioids at all, none. And I have no intention of staying in this wheelchair, even though doctors say I can't. I'm gonna walk out of Baconic Landing someday. I'm serious, I'm going to.
So I loved Harmon's talk about the bicycle, and the mind is a really powerful thing. And sometimes it takes tools like VR and biosensors, just as the tool that allows us to strengthen that connection with the mind and the body and elevate it. I'm really excited at where VR is going and that we're making this impact. And thank you all for taking interest in what we're doing, because only as a community, till it really takes a village to make a new technology come to life. And being part of something like this means a lot. And so thank you for your time and interest.